Hey, what's up guys? This is Anthony from Anthony's Customs, and for this video, I am all out of reviews, so we are going to be looking at a top 10 video today. I don't have anything left to review right now that's new, which I'll get to in a second, but I haven't done a top 10 video in about a month because I thought the 100 and the various top 10s were enough at the end of the last year. So I gave it a month off, but now we're gonna do one because I'm due for one anyway, and like I said, I don't have anything to review. This is the top 10 Marvel Legends Build-A-Figures of all time. And this is something that I have had lots of requests for, but what I'm doing now is I'm letting the Patreon people kind of, not really vote, but give me suggestions for what kind of top 10 videos they want to see. And this is one that came up, and I've been meaning to do it anyway, so I figured we'd go ahead and get it started. This does include both Hasbro and Toy Biz, which does go to show that neither one is necessarily better than the others. They are both good at different things. I don't think we need to have that debate, so we're not going to. We're just going to talk about the 10 best ones overall since the beginning of time, of Marvel Legends time anyway. But if you guys do want to see some reviews of some of these older figures that I haven't looked at in a long time, let me know, and maybe we'll take a look at those in their own videos coming up in the near future. But first, let's start with some honorable mentions. First honorable mention goes to the Juggernaut Build-A-Figure. Now, the reason this guy is not higher on the list is he's very plasticky. I happen to personally really like this guy, but he's so shiny. He's very, very shiny, and he looks a lot like a toy, less like a high-end collectible, as you'll see some of these later ones definitely do look like. So yeah, he's a really cool figure. I don't know that they're ever gonna make a better Juggernaut figure in this line, short of the variant version of this that got released later. But as far as Build-A-Figures go, I think this is probably the best we're ever gonna get as a Juggernaut, so it had to make the list. And then I want to talk about one other one as an honorable mention, and that would be Mr. Dormammu, which is not how you pronounce his name, but it's a lot more fun to say. And the reason this guy makes the list is because he's one of the figures that's just going to stand out best on your shelf, short of maybe the rest of the figures on this list. He's not that big, and as you can see, I'm using Gambit just for a quick size comparison for each of these figures, but he just stands out. He's very colorful, he has a decent amount of paint, some translucent plastic, some nice more translucent plastic accessories. He's just one of those figures that looks really cool. It's something you could mistake for a high-end collectible. Yes, again, we did get this guy as another release later on, and that is something that kind of bugs me about Build-A-Figures. I don't think they should be able to be regular figure releases. I think they should be something different, which is why you have to build them to make them. But it is what it is, and he is still a really cool figure, so that is why he made the list. Coming in at number 10, we have Mojo, which is somewhat contentious, I suppose, because it has almost no articulation other than the arms, and that's definitely a problem. And then the spider legs are kind of janky, which is why he's so very low on the list. This is a great example of something we don't get anymore, and that is an attention to detail. Is it the cleanest thing? No, but look at the wires on the back of that thing, on the back of the chair. Look at just the arm of the chair going up along the back. Look at the whole thing. It's just covered in paint, covered in detail. It was made with a lot of care. Is it the best action figure in the world? Absolutely not, but it's gonna look good on a shelf. It's something that you wouldn't get as a regular action figure, but it's something you needed to fill out your collection, and they did a really good job with what they had. This is one of those things where even though it's really old, you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell. It's held up very well, short of the few issues that I pointed out. And so this is one that's definitely a good Build-A-Figure. It's not the best action figure, but it is the kind of thing that makes a good Build-A-Figure and has a lot of great little details to kind of pump up those numbers. Coming in at number 9, we have Rhino, and the reason this guy makes the list, I'm sure some of you are surprised that he's here, but the reason he's on the list is they actually did a really solid job sculpting this guy, and he is literally covered in paint. This just goes to show that a nice dry brush, or even a wash in some cases, can really make a figure pop. This guy has not a lot of detail work, but he doesn't need it because of the way the paint was implemented. It really goes a long way sometimes to just have a little bit of paint, and this is a perfect example of that. The other thing that makes this guy really stand out to me is that you do get the classic version, then you also get the armored version with the alternate head and the shoulder pads, and I think that adds a lot of versatility to the figure. But ultimately, this is just like the perfect Rhino. It's not the most articulated thing in the world. I don't think it needs to be. It would be nice, but I don't think it's something that's absolutely necessary. I think this guy will go a long way as far as the line goes. I don't think they're going to have to replace him anytime in the foreseeable future. Very well executed overall, and it's a perfect recreation as far as practicality goes of Rhino. Like I said, I don't think they're going to need to replace him anytime soon, and so he definitely has to make the list. There's not a lot you could ask for other than an entire redesign with new engineering, which, again, that's not necessary. Coming in at number 8 is a figure I thought I'd have higher up on the list, but as I was going through all of these other Build-A-Figures, I noticed something about this one, which is kind of a bummer, and it's just that it doesn't have that much paint on it. And the paint that is there isn't that clean. Now, they didn't paint anything really except for the face and the spider logo, so to speak. And the spider logo is fairly fuzzy in a lot of places, and that just really turned me off. Now, it's still on the list, obviously, and it's still a fantastic figure, but it doesn't go any higher because of that paint issue. Now, the main reason he is on the list, though, goodness, is this a good sculpt. This is by far one of, if not the best sculpts Hasbro has ever done in terms of anatomy. They have all of the muscle groups, which is not always something we get these days, but they have all the details in the right place. The proportioning's really nice. There's veins. I mean, it's just, the sculpt work is so organic and nice compared to most of the other things. Like, look at Juggernaut, for instance. Now, I know it's not supposed to have the same kind of build, but the detail sculpting is just not there on Juggernaut at all compared to this guy. This guy looks like he's made out of muscles rather than Lego blocks. You get what I'm saying? Juggernaut's very boxy and square, and that's how most Marvel Legends are these days. This guy doesn't have that at all. He's completely organic, very natural looking. It's just an excellent, excellent sculpt. And it's still a really stunning figure, even though it doesn't have the best paint job. That's just why he's not higher up on the list. Quick side note, we are getting a black and white version. Let me know what you think about that in the comment section below. Coming in at number 7, we have the first Onslaught Build-A-Figure that we ever got. It is not the same version as the newer one, and though I personally prefer the newer character design, this figure is by far better in some ways. It is just loaded with sculpt work. It has a very nice paint job, though it's relatively minimal. But it again has just all kinds of detail in the sculpt. Technically, the articulation is really good. This one's old, so it's kind of loose and stuck in some places. That's just going to happen from these older figures. But if this came out today, exactly as it is, obviously a new figure, just not old and worn, you wouldn't think it was anything old. You wouldn't think this was from 15 years ago or 10 years ago or however. I guess it would have been more like 15, huh? Anyway, this is a really excellent example of how much care and effort went into some of these earlier figures. He's fairly large, there's a ton of plastic to him, and just loads of attention to detail and care for the sculpt. It's definitely a crazy design. It's not, I personally don't like this design for Onslaught at all, but the figure is what it's supposed to be, and they did a really, really good job with it. It's one of those ones I always come back to, and it just reminds me of a time when action figures were a lot more fun. You pull one of these guys out, even with their loose joints or stuck joints or whatever it is, whatever the case may be, and you're gonna just enjoy it more. And I didn't buy this new, and like I said, I have no attachment to the character, so it's not a thing of nostalgia. It's just, you can tell that there was heart and soul put into the figures back then, more so than now. We're gonna get into that a little bit more as we go, so let's just go ahead and move on. Coming in at number 6, we have the Blob. Not one of the most intricate figures in the world, but I don't think they're ever going to do anything better. I think this one is particularly good. Is it perfect? No. I think the biggest place we could see improvement is the hips, but really I don't see them making a whole new version of this guy where everything else is as good as it is here. Even the paint job, though it's minimal, he has freckles all over his entire body, which, say what you want about freckles, it's a nice feature to add to the figure. And also this really faint or pale yellow that they have, the striping on there, it's super clean. We don't get that anymore these days. We almost never get a clean paint job, let alone yellow on navy blue. It just doesn't happen. But the thing that stands out the most is the face and the paint job for the face, but the sculpt in particular, it's just very well detailed. It actually has character. It looks like a character, and it has character. Hopefully you understand what I mean by that. We don't get this kind of intricacy in the figures anymore nowadays. Everything looks like it comes off of a blank body that they kind of just tweaked to turn into something, whereas the figures from before, whether it's Hasbro or Toy Biz, a lot of the older figures have a little bit more of a unique quality to them, a little bit more care and attention seems to have been put into them, and so I appreciate that. It doesn't cost any more to make the figure look right. In the facial features, for example, you have to sculpt the face either way. You yeah, there's just really something about these older figures that makes them stand out, whether it's a cleaner paint job and cleaner sculpts overall, or the specifics, the care that went into them. And this guy's a good example of that. By far not the best action figure in the world, though I don't think there's a lot you can do about that. Like I said, it's mostly just going to come down to the hips. This guy's going to be a perfect fit in the collection for many years to come. Even if a new one comes out, this one, it still holds up perfectly fine, no problem at all. Coming in at number 5, we have another one which I was not expecting to put on the list. It has very little articulation, hard to call it an action figure, but look at the face, look at the paint, look at the sculpt. You just don't see that anymore. You don't see it. This is exactly what a MODOK figure should be. Just look at the back even. It would be on a contemporary figure today, that would just all be solid molded plastic. We wouldn't have any color. This not only has 3 or 4 different paint jobs on here, but we also have, or different colors of paint, but we also have shading at the seams and around the corners. It's just so well detailed. These pieces from before, whether they were basically statues like this one, although he does have the arms and legs, whether they were that or the fully articulated ones, they looked like collectibles. This thing looks good on a shelf. It looks like a little statue, and in this case it kind of is, but you get so much more care and attention, and it's just, I don't want to keep saying the same thing over and over again, but I kind of have to, because on this top 10 list, again, whether it's Hasbro or Toy Biz, these figures stand out for a reason when you put them on a shelf. And it's not just because they're bigger than some of the other ones, it's because of the details. It's because of what you see when you look at it. You don't see a hunk of plastic, you see a collectible, you see that character. And this is a perfect example. Look at that face. Couldn't be any better. Coming in at number 4, we have a big one. This is Giant Man, and this is just a great example of how to do a Build-A-Figure. Look at that. Look at how big he is compared to Gambit. It's a Build-A-Figure for a reason. You can't buy that regularly. Now, the only reason this guy's not higher on the list is because he is still basically just an upscaled figure, and he does have some proportion issues. His paint job's super clean, there's shading everywhere. You don't get that anymore, so that's awesome. Definite bonus for this guy. The paint job is definitely clean where the line work comes in, but he does kind of have huge legs and a very short torso, so it looks a little weird. The width is okay for a lot of the things, but the proportioning is definitely a little bit off, so he's not farther along on the list. But still, this is a great example of a Build-A-Figure. He makes the recent Giant Man figure that we got look silly, and this is just, again, figures used to be so much more fun. If this guy had fist hands and better proportions, he'd probably be the #1 figure on the list. Well, maybe. We'll see. There's some pretty good ones coming up, but again, just a different time of action figures. So much care went into these. And you could feel that when you bought them. It made it so much more fun, honestly. And again, I didn't buy any of these things new, so it's not a matter of nostalgia. I started collecting Marvel Legends way late in the game, after Hasbro took over and after Hasbro took a hiatus from making them, so it's not a matter of nostalgia. I bought these the same time I bought a lot of other Hasbro things. It's just a matter of quality. Coming in at number 3, we have one that I knew was going to be somewhere near the top, and it happens to be Apocalypse, with 2 more ahead of him. This guy is just, oh, man. The current Apocalypse Build-A-Figure, the one that we got relatively recently, I mean, it's fine. It's okay for what it is, but it is not this. This thing is just an amazing piece of collectible history as far as Marvel goes. It's humongous. There's paint everywhere, sculpt everywhere. Yeah, his waist is a little small. Yeah, you know what? They're not perfect. They definitely had some issues. His lats are maybe a little bit gigantic, sure. Like, I'm not saying any of these are perfect, guys. But goodness, if you collect Marvel Legends and you don't have this thing, you're doing something wrong. You're doing it wrong. You need to get these. If you're looking at this list and there's things you're missing, you should probably add them to your collection. You will appreciate it, even if you don't think you'll want it. Look at that figure. That's going to go on your shelf, assuming it'll fit on your shelf, because it is a big boy. And it's going to be impressive to look at. The head sculpt alone, super impressive. Clean paints, clean sculpt, everything. But the body, all of it, it has the V shape, even though it's a little bit egregious. It just has everything you want in an action figure. Now, mind you, this thing's super old and some of the joints tend to get loose, but he had no trouble standing up for me, even with the loose joints. And there's just no way to compete against figures like this as a Build-A-Figure with what they're doing now. And you'll see as we go through these last couple, it doesn't have to be old and made by Toy Biz to be one of the really good ones. Hasbro's capable of doing it, guys. They're capable of doing it, but they seem to not want to, whether it's because they can't or whether they want to maximize profits, I can't say. But I think we have an idea of where that would lean if we had to pick one. Coming in at number 2, we have the one that I think a lot of people probably thought would be number 1, because this one is exceptional. This is obviously the Sentinel, and just like Apocalypse, and just like I said for MODOK, these things look like statues. I didn't say that for Apocalypse, but I said it for MODOK, and similar to Apocalypse, he's humongous, and it has everything you want in an action figure. It is fully articulated, though the feet are fairly limited, and you have some issues with the size to weight ratio, though we even see that with some of NECA's figures, and they're perfectly contemporary. This guy is just chock full of detail and paint. If you look at him up close, he's got little tubers and wires and rivets and all kinds of stuff going on, especially in the torso and the upper arms. Most of the joints. The face, covered in paint detail. It looks exactly like you want it to look. Yeah, I mean, maybe they could go for a different version or something like that, or thicken them up a little bit, but even still, I mean, that's really splitting hairs. If you got a figure like this today, it would be groundbreaking. Except it wouldn't be, because we got them, what, 15 years ago or whenever this came out. I can't remember, it's been a long time now and I'm getting old. But just imagine getting a Build-A-Figure like this today. It's like mind-boggling to even think about that, because it's not even close. The things we get nowadays don't even come close to matching this kind of stuff. And I mean, that's really a shame, I think, and people don't seem to realize it. I'm kind of getting sad. No, I'm not really getting sad, but I mean, it is kind of a bummer to think that things like this don't happen anymore, and they probably never will. Look at the detail on that. That thing looks good on a shelf from a mile away or when you're right up close. It's not just a hunk of shiny plastic. Man, we just don't get stuff like this anymore. It's very, very unfortunate. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Puck. It's small, but it's really good, and I think you're gonna like it. Is something I've said so many times. No, really, what we're gonna look at the real number 1, and the number 1 spot has to go to Rocket Raccoon. Again, small, but just packed with all kinds of power, and boy, this is sounding like something I've said so many times. Okay, but seriously, let's talk about the real number 1. It's gonna be Hitmonkey. Again, it's very tiny, and I think that's what we should come to expect from... Okay, fine. Oh, there it is. That's the one. That's number 1. The real number 1 is Fin Fang Foom. And this is a great example of what can be done when a company wants to do it. Honestly, it's a perfect example, because the wave he came from, not great. Not great at all. Lots of turds in that wave. Honestly speaking, the wave was pretty garbage. But guess what? Everybody wanted this. You put a Build-A-Figure like this in a wave, you can sell turds of figures, because who cares? You're gonna spend that amount of money or more on the Build-A-Figure down the road anyway, so you might as well put it in there. Or buy it that way. So Hasbro could do this. Easily they could do this. And as you can see, this isn't the most intricate design. Let's see if I can speak English. Yeah, it's got some really nice sculpt work, but the paints are relatively basic. Lots of mold costs in it for sure, but it's not like the most incredible thing ever. But it is in another sense, and that is, you can't get a figure like this at all otherwise. If they sold this individually, it would cost a fortune. But if they spread that cost across a line of figures which aren't that expensive and have a huge profit margin, they could do it. They could do it. But something like this nowadays just isn't even close to what we get. I mean, we get things like Sauron, which everybody thinks is a great figure, most people do anyway, but it's a reused turd figure that they put new parts on to make it better. I mean, it's Lizard from the Spider-Man movie, and that's why he has birthing hips and a tiny little chest. That's why it looks weird. They could have made a brand new figure, but instead, no. Instead of having a figure like this where it's all new parts and it's gigantic, it's mostly reused parts, and that's what we consider to be a good thing nowadays. Think about that. And I'm not saying Sauron's bad, I'm just saying there are things about it that aren't good when we get things like this. Compare this to Sauron, another one, like I said, that's very good. There's no contest, not even close. We don't get stuff like this, and we should. And I think that's fair enough to say. I think that's fair enough to say. You guys can let me know what you think in the comment section below. But there he is, there's number 1. So there it is, guys. That's my top 10 list of the Marvel Legends Build-A-Figures from the beginning of time to now. You guys can let me know what you think about it, and we'll talk about it in the comment section below. If you think I missed anything, go ahead and let me know. And if you think my list was absolutely perfect, well, go ahead and let me know that too, because why not? But that'll do it. Oh, otherwise, I guess let me know if there's if you want me to review any of these older ones, like to do kind of like a re-review type thing, because I think I have reviewed all of them. Let me know, we can do that. I have a few things coming in the mail, but right now, I'm completely dry. I don't have anything to review. So this is gonna go up on Saturday, and we might have a few days of nothing. So just keep watching this one, or go back and watch the top 100 video and enjoy that. But otherwise, that's it, guys. Thanks a bunch for watching. I do appreciate it. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't, and I will see you next time.